The Disruption, a lively discussion between UVA Darden School of Business professors Yael Grushka-Cocaine and Mike Lennox on cutting-edge technologies and practices that are challenging the status quo.
Hello, Yael. How you doing?
I am fantastic. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing well. Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Do you like salads?
Oh, I was going to ask you, have you had your veggies today? We are thinking alike.
I know. So you got to answer my question. Do you like salads?
I do love salads.
So what do you like on your salad?
I am a tomato freak.
Ooh, tomatoes. Okay.
Yes.
Not just tomatoes? That doesn't sound like a salad.
No, I love tomatoes, but I am also broccoli and cauliflower. I have my very specifics. Asparagus. I don't like lettuce, really. Not a huge cucumber fan unless it's a pickle.
Do you have your own garden? Do you have like a...
We do have a little vegetable garden. It's not in great shape right now. I think my husband needs to turn his attention. Now that he's finished my shoe wall, he can turn his attention to the vegetable garden.
You got to have your priorities.
Exactly.
We've had a garden for years, and we're terrible. We're terrible about it. It always is overgrown.
Exactly.
And occasionally we get some good stuff, but it's been some work. But what if I told you that you could have an amazing garden growing, an amazing salad in a building?
That would be awesome.
Well, we're going to talk about vertical farming today.
Vertical farming.
Have you heard of this?
I have, but I never could quite understand the idea or the word vertical in that. What is that supposed to describe?
Well, what we're going to be talking about is, again, a technology. And this is a technology, an advancement in our ability to grow crops in, let's say, a building in the simplest case, and in a way that is arguably much more sustainable than what we traditionally do in terms of our farming. So let me talk a little bit about the context of the problem. And this is something we've talked about before in our segment on clean meat, another radical idea. So close to 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions are actually directly from the production of food. In a variety of different ways. In the U.S., it's only about 10%, but again, globally, it's about 25%. In the case of clean meat, we were talking about livestock, which is a significant producer. But there's another big source, which is nitric oxide, which is a byproduct of the use of nitrogen-based fertilizers, which are prevalent throughout the world. And so when you think about growing in the kind of traditional sense, you have an environment exposed to the world, right? You have droughts, you have different sunshine, different temperatures, you've got
limited land,
you got pests, you've got all of these things that contribute to the need to use these fertilizers, and again, contribute to not only climate change, but also degradation of topsoil that we see. About 90% of the world's topsoil could be at risk by 2050 here. And we have this increasing need to do more of this because of our growing population. Again, we should hit about 9.7 billion by 2050 here. And so a big question of how are we going to feed an increasingly growing world and at the same time do so in a sustainable fashion. And so here's where kind of vertical farming comes in.
So the idea is that we do not rely on the land as much as we did until now, and that we move indoors, correct?
Exactly. And so what that allows you to do is really control the environment. Often this is like hydroponics, where you're using, kind of water. You don't have the soil usage in these facilities. You can create closed systems where water is recirculated.
I'm suddenly seeing Matt Damon. Is that the way to think about it?
That's a great way to think of it. Yeah. Okay. So you're thinking of The Martian.
I am thinking of The Martian.
Where you're creating kind of a closed ecosystem here.
Yes.
And my understanding is these are high tech facilities here that are using robotics, they're using AI, they're using computers to simulate the environment and then figure out what kind of optimal dosages would be here to, in essence, create crops that, one, can be grown all times of year. Even here in Charlottesville, we're in the South, but we get our snowstorms and our ice, and you can't grow all year round. You can in these facilities here. You can, again, reduce, if not eliminate, the use of pesticides, because there's not going to be pests in these closed environments here. You can use lighting to be able to grow, through the course of the day, not just when the sun is shining. So you literally can begin to produce food in a very efficient way using these types of facilities.
So it's not just like what we think of as a greenhouse, or is it not the next step of a greenhouse, or is it something of that kind?
I'm sure those who are in the vertical farming community be insulted because calling it just a greenhouse. I think but that is not a bad analogy.
Okay.
And I think they do use a mix, depending on the facility, of natural light and then artificial light and the like here. One of the other great advantages of this is you could locate the food near the places of consumption, like in urban areas.
Okay,
so it's going to be
fantastic.
like true urban farming using these types of facilities.
Okay, so now I'm seeing a different disruption where suddenly if I am a restaurant, I have my vertical farm in my facility, like in my next door to my kitchen. I don't need vendors to start shipping things in, and I don't have to worry about deliveries and the like. Is that what you're envisioning?
I think that's potentially one. It's just complete co-location of some of these facilities. I think the other interesting efforts are to have some scale, so to build some bigger warehouses. So it might be down the block that you source your food here.
Okay, fantastic. So I can imagine reusing some of our leftover malls that we have here, like the old-fashioned malls, and repurpose them to now become a vertical farm in the middle of the city.
I don't know if that's possible. That seems like a cool idea. Now, it isn't all roses here.
Yes, I'm sure there are challenges because we don't see this everywhere, do we?
Right. And there's some challenges and trade-offs. One, it's very energy intensive. In some ways, you're replacing, some of the features you have in the outdoors by using electricity and lighting and the like to supplement that.
Yeah, we wanted to go to more solar and not less solar.
Yeah, exactly. And then, there are high startup costs to kind of build these facilities. So the interesting question, I think, is how far can we push this concept, right? Right now, you're seeing it being used for various types of what we might call truck crops, maybe some herbs or lettuce and the like here. Is there potential to scale this for some of our bigger crops like wheat or rice or corn? Open question. We're not there yet from the economics of this.
What about the quality, the taste, the look, and things that people care about in terms of their veg and stuff that they eat?
I think the argument is because you don't have the pests, because you don't have that variability you naturally have in a less controlled environment, that it should be actually better. And that co-location, you don't have to worry about spoilage. You don't have to worry about, again, shipping things across the world, which we do in some crops, and so it hopefully has a healthier and better footprint here at the end of the day.
Would you still call it organic?
Oh, that's a great question. Organic actually has a technical meaning in the U.S. It's part of a USDA certification that's there. I think we need to bring out our expert in at this point to be able to answer these questions. I don't know if it can qualify for organic or not, but we can ask him. Well, it's my pleasure to have Jack Ross with us. Jack is a graduate of the University of Virginia. Near and dear to my heart, he's an engineering graduate in computer engineering, which I think is going to be interesting here. We'll have to ask if he has any agriculture background beyond that. He also is an alumni of our Innovation Lab, our iLab incubator program, back in 2017. Jack is the CTO of Beanstalk Farm, and he's also one of the founders, which he founded with his brother, Mike. We should ask him how that is, founding a business with your brother. But Jack, absolute pleasure to have you with us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to give kind of that computer engineering backstory and talk about how it really makes a difference in what we do at Beanstalk with our vertical farming technology.
So can you tell us more about Beanstalk?
Yeah, I was going to say, tell us how, everything that I said that was probably wrong in our beginning of our conversation here. What did I get wrong and what did I get right about this?
No, I think you all brought up some, very keen points on the industry and some of the challenges that we face from our food system and also from implementing this new technology in the food system, this new technology of vertical farming. I generally like to start with more of the personal side of why this shift to indoor agriculture is significant. I think all of us are trying to eat a little bit better. We're learning more about the effect of food on our health. And fresh produce, fresh vegetables in particular, have such a wonderful effect on our health. And it's I think, important as we look at advancing our food system to build a food system that's more focused on fresh food than it is on processed foods. And, I think at the same time, though, while we're trying to eat better, we also are experiencing bags of salad that you open and they spoil within just a few days, or we're buying fruit at the grocery store that doesn't really have much flavor to it. And there's good reason as to why that is. The majority of our produce, even in the United States, is imported. And so they're spending a lot of time in transit, which is eating up a lot of that shelf life or causing it to spoil so quickly. We are eating fruit, look at that strawberry, maybe that's mostly white on the inside. That strawberry was picked just a little bit too early before it was ripe so that it could survive that transit. And so when we look at indoor farming or vertical farming, it gives us this opportunity to grow food closer to its consumption. So we get it fresher, we have more shelf life. It also enables us to pick food that is riper, which means it'll have more nutritional content, it'll taste better. And I think those are really significant features that will help us shift towards healthier diets and away from processed food.
Can you tell us a little more, Jack, about the tech side? You mentioned before, like your computer engineering background here. How does that translate into these indoor farms, these vertical farms?
Certainly. So I'm a computer engineer from UVA. My brother, he's an aerospace engineer from Georgia Tech. And it gives us a really unique perspective on this problem. In engineering, we like to understand the system and what affects it. And when we look at the production of fresh food, we're really going back to our first principles approach. And we're saying, hey, what is needed to grow this food? What are the costs of those inputs? When we start to forecast out, when we really look at scale, what can these costs approach? Where can we really create food that is superior in quality and nutrition, but also affordable for everyone? And so when we first started in our early days at Beanstalk, we were looking at the infrastructure required. You mentioned high startup costs. We looked at the infrastructure of greenhouses or of other vertical farms, and we saw that they were prohibitively expensive, something that wouldn't scale to a very large degree at their current costs. And so we spent a great deal of time developing new technology that I'm happy to dive into more detail, but we were able to reduce that startup cost by an order of magnitude, more than 10x. And then additionally, we really turned our eye towards the energy requirement. You mentioned that we do have artificial light, high efficiency LEDs, but even still, they have to be powered. And so we wanted to develop a farm and have developed a farm that is more efficient. We can use solar energy. If you capture, using solar panels on an acre, we can grow more than an acre's worth of food. So it's a net positive in that direction where we can start to produce more out of less, which I really think is one of the key things that we think about as engineers.
Oh, fantastic. So I was, when you first introduced the business and some of the benefits of it sounded to me like it had a lot to do with proximity and more direct to table, as we like to call it today. But what you're now describing is also the agri-tech side of things, right? That there's also technological improvements in how we grow what we grow and the conditions under which we're kind of investing in to improve the efficiency that we get from every piece of land. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It has to start with a superior product, be it leafy greens or other vegetables that people are really excited about purchasing and improve their life. But we don't stop there. We want to make sure that the way in which we're growing the food is more sustainable, better for the environment, and ultimately a better experience for our customer.
So can we talk a little bit about scaling, as I mentioned before? Talk to us a little bit about what you're growing now in your farm and kind of the cost economics of other types of crops you might move to.
From the beginning, it's about getting to scale. Our technology removes so much of the complexity of indoor farming. We found a way to remove all of the irrigation systems from a farm. So a traditional indoor farm, be it a greenhouse or vertical farm, has an incredible network of plumbing. They're moving water around constantly, oxygenating that water, treating the water, and then delivering it to the growing crops. We found a way where we could use water that's standing still, which becomes depleted of oxygen. That would normally result in poor growth in the crop. the root system needs oxygen to develop. We found this incredible response in a plant where it develops a specialized root system and it can respirate oxygen directly from the air. Turns out that helps accelerate the growth process, and we're able to grow our crops faster than you would in any other system. And then it had another kind of compound effect, which is because we don't have this intricate plumbing or this irrigation system, we can use soil without risk of clogging any valves or pipes or anything like that. And so that was a really big step forward for indoor farming, being able to use soil, which results in a more nutrient-rich crop. It's also more sustainable. We can compost that material. We can use it again in our system and have more of a closed-loop farming method. So that big breakthrough, it made for a simpler farm, which makes it much, much easier to build. And it also gave us this reusable input in our soil, which makes it much more cost-effective.
Fantastic. So what kind of vegetables do you grow? Or is it only vegetables?
We've grown all different types. When we were first developing this technology, it took us about 5 years to really nail down this method of creating this response in the root system regularly and reliably. And then we wrap up all of that into the form of a pallet, or about a 4-by-foot container. And then we have thousands and thousands of these containers inside of a warehouse that are being moved around by robots and brought from a seeding line into a growing tower, and out of the tower into a harvesting line. The high volume crops that we're producing right now are leafy greens and salads, things like Italian arugula or this amazing kale that's actually on the sweeter side, not bitter. But we have grown many other things in this technology as well. Since we're using soil, we can quickly adopt crops that have been tuned for outdoor growing, things that have been selected heirloom products that have incredible flavor and nutrition, and grow them in our soil. So we've grown different types of cherry tomatoes and peppers and purple carrots and lavender and all sorts of different products like that.
Yeah, I had a friend who had a tapas restaurant, and he would comment that he could look at every plate and say, I can make margin on this one, I can't on this one. How do you think about that in terms of these different crops? Because I've got to imagine heirloom tomatoes, I'm just going to guess maybe, attractive margins because maybe the people are willing to pay more. Iceberg lettuce, maybe less so. Is that the correct way to think about this?
Yeah, there certainly are crops that make more sense for us to start with. Things, we really looked at it from a easier to get going perspective. So on these leafy greens and herbs as well, generally the majority of the crop is saleable. It also grows a little bit more quickly, so you don't have the same kind of pest pressure that you might with trees or things like that are around for a very long time. So that was one of the key motivations for our product selection. And then when we go to the market, we're looking for crops that quality really makes a big difference, where we can get started by having a clearly superior quality, which is easy to do in leafy greens. And then we're looking for high volume. And the interesting thing is salad is, it's been around for a while, but it is increasing in volume at an alarming rate. Depending on the specific category, it's growing 8 to 15% per year and has been for almost 20 years. So our diets are shifting for the better, but that's happening at the same time as arable land is decreasing. So when I look out more long term, we're either going to run into shortages, or we're going to have to figure out a new way to grow that food to feed this changing diet. And so that's really what led us to this crop as being the perfect place to start.
Well, I have so many questions. I'm thinking about population growth that both you and Mike mentioned here as something to think about in terms of the future and laying the foundation now to feed where we will be in a few years. But we know that the population is growing in places like Africa. The conditions there are different. Is this a technology that you imagine can be relevant and utilized in areas of developing economies around the world or developing countries, areas that are growing in population that require some improvement in terms of the efforts that they have around agriculture?
Certainly. Yeah, this is a technology that works anywhere in the world or hopefully one day on other planets. And when we look at our process, we're taking some resources, things that are in our soil. We develop that nutritional content through the composting process. We will bring in some other additions into that soil to help provide everything for the plant. And then we're providing energy, which we can do via solar panels. And then with that, we can have a closed process. And that's really what we're after here. We want a closed loop system that can continue to generate healthy food. So wherever this system is, it will provide a healthy source of food for that community over the long term.
Got it.
So Yael mentioned The Martian with Matt Damon. Is that in our future? Is that possible?
Well, as I mentioned, my brother is an aerospace engineer, so we have watched every SpaceX launch that there's been. It's honored our company when they launched the large missions, and that's something that I think is really exciting. And I have every faith that we will end up there, and somebody's going to have to grow the food. So I'm raising my hand. We're ready to go.
Yeah, Beanstalk is top of line. What about? I'm sure that there are challenges and downsides. I mean, I'm thinking about the next David Attenborough documentary around our planet and things that we're doing that do or do not disrupt the ecosystem that we have. I mean, vegetables grow for a reason, in the soil, and that's the way that the earth works. How are we changing the balance of our nature around us with these types of innovations, and specifically with vertical farms?
Just a little question there.
I know, sorry. I was inspired. I'm on my soapbox for David Attenborough.
I love the visuals there. David, who doesn't love listening to David Attenborough?
Yeah.
Our current agriculture system is having a very profound effect on our planet and the ecosystems around where we grow food. In addition to the land that it might use, one of the larger issues is the water that it requires and then what goes into the water that runs off those farms. So much of our fresh water, particularly as we look out west and down into Mexico where a lot of our produce is grown, so much of the fresh water is going towards agriculture, and most of it, greater than half of it runs off of the farm, carrying whatever kinds of pesticides or fertilizers were applied to that outdoor farm. And then we can start to see large algae blooms or other negative effects in that ecosystem. And then on top of that, that food is then being put on trucks and driven, in most cases, 3,000 miles to get to us on the East Coast. So there's some major consequences to our current methods of production. And as we are trying to get the most out of these fields, we're depleting the soil of its nutrition, and fields can then have serious trouble. So moving indoors, we conserve a great deal of water. We use 95% less water than what would be used outside. And that's because we don't have any runoff. Any water we're bringing into the facility is going directly to the plant. We can then capture evaporation and reincorporate it. And so that's a big step forward, removing any of that runoff. And then because we're indoors, we run our facilities at positive pressure. So pathogens or bugs can't fly in through anything that might allow them to enter. And so we don't apply any pesticides. We don't spray any chemicals onto our canopies or onto our crops. And so it results in a pure product that is ready to eat the moment it comes off the farm. And it means that we don't have any runoff into our surrounding ecosystem. So those are some of the primary ways that we're looking at having a beneficial impact on the areas that we're growing in.
Do you see any use of this, or see the future use of this technology for some of our bigger crops like wheat and corn and rice, where, dare I say, I believe like the vast majority of our calories at least come from globally?
So you are correct. The vast majority of our calories do come from those cereal crops. And the reason for that is the logistical ease that processed foods have. Over 90% of the products that are in our grocery stores are processed or ultra processed. And one of the major concerns there is these processed foods can have an incredible spike on our glycemic index. They're often full of a lot of sugars, things that generally just make us unhealthy. Rather than find more efficient ways to grow the crops that turn into processed foods, we're interested in making fresh food more available and more appealing, and shifting our diets away from this heavy cereal diet more towards a diet of fresh fruits and vegetables.
Is your thinking then that that could grow as much in our diet that we could just drastically reduce these other types of crops?
Absolutely. My brother and I, we both eat a tremendous amount of salad. It's our primary food. And my brother's a triathlete. He's going to complete an Ironman later this year. So there's more than enough calories available, nutrition available, protein available in a diet of fruits and vegetables. That said, we still eat protein and other things, but when fruits and vegetables take up a larger portion of our diet, I think it ultimately has a really positive effect on our health.
With every technology and almost any innovation that we've talked about in our podcast, we've often kind of raised the question of trust and where people start to get nervous or distrust of new technology. And my guess here is that if you asked people on the street, while it sounds very natural in all other senses and much more authentic in the way that you approach it, people start to worry about things like GMO and kind of manufactured crops in a way that is kind of new and concerning. Is that something that is top of mind for you guys as you think about innovation, how to push the right type of innovation but not intimidate folks?
It is top of mind for us. And when we select the seeds that we grow, we spend a great deal of time understanding where these seeds are coming from, what benefits we're getting from this particular variety of the crop that we're growing. Our crops are heirloom. We do not have GMO seeds in our facility. We think that nature does a pretty incredible job of creating food that is nutritious and also very tasty. So that's an important aspect of the growing process for us, to choose these natural crops and then provide the ultimate environment for these plants to thrive. So using soil, we have a lot of biological activity in our soil that we cultivate. We have mycorrhizal fungus that helps bring nutrients to these plants that are developing. We really try to use these natural processes to our advantage. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it creates a very healthy heirloom product when heirloom seeds are available. And then by getting it to our customers, 24 hours after harvest, there's more nutrition available in that product. One of the little things that I learned through this process is nutrition actually decays exponentially with time. So getting produce closer to its point of harvest will have a very large effect on the amount of nutrition that we're getting from our food.
Jack, I'm curious, I study business strategy. What are the strategic implications of this? And what immediately comes to mind is the traditional agriculture system is one based on massive economies of scale and very robust, we hope they're robust, vertical supply chains here in terms of, like you were saying before, transporting thousands of miles to the point of sale.
Especially in the U.S.
How does that change as vertical farming begins to grow and expand? I believe you guys have experimented with a number of different business models, including direct business to customer. Is that correct?
Yes, we certainly have a couple different distribution methods. But to acknowledge that first point about the existing system, it's incredibly impressive that we are able to get food from all of these different places in the world to our grocery store, that we might have strawberries in January, even if they aren't fresh to say. But I think we also learned during COVID that this large distribution system is a little bit more fickle than we might hope. There were all kinds of shortages in the grocery store because the things that we were importing from all these other countries or trucking across our country weren't able to get to their destination.
We need a vertical toilet paper farm. That's what we need.
So I think having a more resilient food system looks like having a decentralized production system. So to be able to put these farms closer to their points of consumption as a part of that community results in a much more resilient system.
Do you imagine vertical integration maybe from the user side, in the sense like a restaurant will have their own little vertical farm, attached to the side of it?
I definitely see more vertical integration in our roadmap, and as we become a larger company. The specific size as to where that makes sense, you are right. There are economies of scale here. Each farm needs somebody to look over it, even with a high degree of automation. It has to receive deliveries and work with customers out of that facility. So there are some economies of scale. As far as dedicated facilities go, certainly for grocery stores, large restaurant chains, potentially communities, I see a world where though they have their own facility. And one of the amazing things that we can do is we can find seeds from anywhere around the world and grow them where they're in demand. So, think of restaurant chains that have particular ingredients. We can have a farm right near their commercial kitchen growing that ingredient that really makes their dish special. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity for us and a way to get more vertically integrated and bring that product closer to the customer.
This has been super insightful. I have one maybe contrary question to ask kind of as we wrap things up, but like, what keeps you up at night? There must be some concerns and worries that you have where we haven't quite nailed it, or that you're still, a problem that you still haven't solved. So what keeps you up at night?
Maybe it's the engineer's brain, which I have had as long as I can remember. I'm always thinking about different ways to do something. So sometimes it makes it hard to sleep. I'll have different ideas I want to go write down, or sometimes I'll call my brother in the middle of the night and say like, hey, what if we planted our seeds this way, or spent a different time in germination, or changed the spacing or airflow, or all the different parts of our system. So always kind of tinkering on our designs, trying to figure out ways to become more efficient. That's generally where my mind goes.
Fair enough. Yeah, as a business professors, I think we both appreciate that a great deal.
Well, Jack, thank you so much for spending time with us, and congratulations on the success you've had already with Beanstalk.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and it was great talking with you all.
All right, what do you think? You're going to go run out and get a vertically integrated
hey,
farm?
I need to find a good anniversary gift for my husband. This might be it. But I was reflecting on my David Attenborough question, and it's interesting because what Jack highlighted, which is important to remember, and we talk about this in many innovations, is that it's all good and well to compare to the way that agriculture was done hundreds of years ago. And yes, it's one of the original forms of economy, and everything started with agriculture, but that's not where the world is right now. So we've moved far away from what was done in a very natural kind of way hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And so right now we're trying to solve the problems that we introduced now, right? That we have right now, the way that we farm, and all the chemicals and all the impact of the environment. And so with that regard, there's a good claim for improvement because the planet needs it.
Yeah, I think I always forget what number we're on. If we've had the fourth industrial
agricultural
revolution.
4.0, exactly.
We've talked about this before. When I think about climate change in particular, agriculture is the one I'm most concerned about. I'm most concerned about it because, again, 25% of global emissions, an industry that we need to grow because of growing population, and simultaneously somehow drastically reduce the impact the industry has. And that is a tall order. Not to mention, it's also an industry that's incredibly distributed. Literally millions of farmers out there in the world, small family farms to big ag. So it's not easy to kind of manage the industry. So I think it's an industry that we're not going to have like a silver bullet where there's going to be one innovation that's going to radically transform it in a sustainable way. I think with that said, I do think vertical farming has a lot of promise. And so, shocker, I'm going to come down on good disruption here.
We have not had a bad disruption for a while.
But I will say, I think I will put a little asterisk by it.
Okay, good.
Not because I think there's, big downsides as we've had with some of the technology we've
Right.
talked about. I just think it's going to be fairly targeted, right? Like to my questions again about the vast needs for, calorie production in the
corn
world.
and rice are not going to change.
Right. And so this is part of a solution, but I don't think it in of itself get us there.
That's fantastic. I didn't hear many downsides, so I've been trying to think about the downside. So for me, it's almost like a great disruption in some ways because it can really, everybody who wants to eat healthy and to continue to invest in their veg, which more and more people seem to care about these days, will maybe buy into this quicker than other solutions. So I like that. And I don't really see a downside.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is already proving itself in the marketplace. So again, I wouldn't say no disruption. Just a question of, how much can we scale this and how ubiquitous will this become? Well,
it might disrupt Whole Foods.
Maybe. Yeah. That would be interesting to think about if they, again, would use these as kind of local production facilities. I am intrigued by the, like I say, the business strategy and market structure implications of this.
All routes either lead to Google or Jeff Bezos. So with that, Mike, thank you again for such an educational session.
Well, thank you, Yael. And as always, let me thank our producer, Gary, and our lead researcher, Becky. Thank you for all you do to make us sound smart again on our podcast. Thank you.
Good Disruption is a podcast from the University of Virginia Darden School of Business.